I'm Lauren with Me Too Many Voices, and I am joined today by Hello Rooster. You may also know them as Justice for Sexual Assault as their Instagram handle. And today, Rooster is going to be talking to us about how power impacts consent, a conversation that I don't feel like is had at all, barely ever, and needs to really be discussed. So again, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you to get things going.
Yeah. I'm Rooster, or Hello Rooster if you're searching online. I'm a non-binary black sex worker, and I'm currently going through like a legal battle regarding like getting justice for sexual assault and consent violations. But my work kind of through all of this, my what I kind of my work kind of or my journey kind of led me to creating ethical guidelines at Eric Lust Films and the Model Bill of Rights there, and also training as something called an intimacy coordinator, who is someone who advocates for safety or safety and safer, better working practices within the film industry, especially for actors when doing scenes of an intimate nature, because a lot of those, I guess, scenes haven't been dealt with enough professionalism in the past. So what an intimacy coordinator tries to do is bring a lot more professionalism to those scenes of an intimate nature, so that actors feel empowered to be able to do intimate scenes like that again and again without it, when they're in a vulnerable state and position, with as much kind of professionalism and autonomy as possible. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of training as. And I'm also a filmmaker, but a lot of that role that I'm training as looks at how power has a very significant role in the discussions of consent, in the discussion of vulnerability and intimacy, not just acting and performing, but also in your private life. So that's what I wanted to, discuss with Lauren today, and see, hopefully be sharing some sort of resources of how I or websites that have discussed how power is very central to the discussions of boundaries and of consent, and how it influences that. And yeah.
Excellent. I already have questions. I want to hear more. I think an intimacy coordinator is such an important job. Film production, there's so many different people on set walking around, and being able to create that safe space,
Mm,
for the actors, for the performers is critical.
yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. And yeah, like intimacy coordination is not a new thing. Like a lot of people maybe mistake that it was birthed out of the Me Too movement, but it was actually, there were a lot of people doing it, or not a lot, but a few people who are discovering or who are navigating that, and kind of developing this new role prior to the Me Too movement. I think since 2006. I don't know. I don't have or I can talk a little bit more if I pull it up. the actual kind of like timeline of who started to kind of develop it. But pretty much, yeah, like I feel since 2006 and 2007, there were like pioneers who were really trying to push for better and safer and professional guidelines and systems in the film industry regarding scenes of an intimate nature. But that really kind of came to a head when the Me Too movement was really on the forefront of the conversation and the public discourse, that it kind of like spearheaded more people talking about it. So I'm currently training with an intimacy coordinator in the UK called Ita O'Brien, who has done shows like Gentleman Jack or Netflix's Sex Education, and a few other stuff. And there's also, you know, like other intimacy coordinators in the US who've worked, you know, on HBO's, I think, the Deuces and stuff like that, where, you know, they are trying to bring much more structure and professionalism to those areas. But it was, I hope the companies, you know, the big film productions and producers and companies that started hiring intimacy coordinators like HBO and like Netflix and all of these companies, I hope it wasn't just because of the Me Too movement that they did that. I hope maybe that made them realize, but I hope they also kind of continue on with that work, because, and that it doesn't just fall out of fashion, because what I've seen training and what is the whole philosophy with a lot of people who are really pushing this work is how there seems to be this, you're ultimately you're fighting against rape culture, not just in the industry, but rape culture as a whole. So you're trying to convince companies that this is important, you know, creating safe spaces, having these, you know, taking that extra time and effort and rehearsals to create a safe space for the performers, for actors to be vulnerable and to be professional. But there is a lot of pushback in terms of like people saying, why is it needed? Like, you know, money and all of these kind of things. But and then you are having to, you know, tell them why. And, you know, usually you're having to be like, well, rape culture and, you know, like boundaries and like power and all of these kind of things. So what ends up being a lot of our work too is kind of convincing, you know, studios and directors and stuff like that, the importance of this work, and why you have to really allow actors to have discussions, to discuss their boundaries and not just dive straight in, you know, to discuss what is a yes, what is a no, to have an empowered no, you know, what they feel safe with. And yeah, you're really having to kind of push back and convince directors and, you know, studios of this, the importance of this work. Yeah.
Which I'm sure can be very frustrating because it seems in, you know, film production, they always find the money when they need it or it's important enough. And
Yeah.
it is important. Um,
Yeah.
this, you know, safety for all crew, staff, actors, every single person working on the show should feel safe and have a environment for them to feel safe, to, like you said, empowered no, to be able to say no, especially when there
Yeah.
are so many different power dynamics at play.
Yeah. So a lot of the in my training, and I should kind of also say that yeah, this analyzing this doesn't just apply to within professional settings. It also applies to your private life, to your intimate settings in, you know, your outside of professional lives. The way power can impact the discussions of consent and what people find pleasurable. If I mainly talk about the professional or like, you know, the film industry, I will still try to link it back to our personal and private lives as well. But the two are very much interlinked. Of through my training, you know, and before even my training, there were stories of or incidents of, you know, actors and performers and, you know, well established actors and well, like really well known films having incidences of, you know, maybe the lead actor pushing a little bit further with in an intimate scene or in a scene that depicts sex or whatever, going a little bit further than what the, you know, maybe the secondary actor was comfortable with, but then not, you know, having like an avenue to discuss why that was, you know, what were the issues with that. You know, there's a famous film called, is it Last Tango in Paris? Wait.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. With Marlon Brando and the very we normally use that as a I guess a basis for understanding how power dynamics play. So this example is you have a very Marlon Brando then in this film. You have a very well established actor who is the principal actor of this film, with also like a very well known director. And you have this young actress, and I think it's one of her first films, and the scene is a non-consensual, like rape scene kind of thing. But instead of informing, you know, the actress about what is required from the scene, or even in the script before giving her the autonomy to make a decision how far she wants to go, or even in rehearsal, they didn't give her the full story of what was required from the scene prior to the scene. So she was just surprised, and maybe not surprised is the right word. She was just thrust into this position that she had no input or say before, and, you know, being put in such a vulnerable position. Then when you are with, like, you know, the lead actor, what can you do to, you know, say no? You know, like it's a very difficult position to be in. You're gonna have feelings of you're going up against someone, you're making them lose face, you know, you're challenging their power. So in my view, the director and Marlon Brando, like, pretty much like ambushed her in this scene to get their own way, and because it would be more realistic and better for the scene. And, you know, this is one way how power impacts, where, you know, not discussing about, you know, one like ambushing someone, but also like the power dynamics of the lead actor's influence over the production and over the director, and also over this very like young young actress, to be able to make an informed choice about what she was comfortable doing in this scene. And, you know, the story goes even further of, Marlo kind of like pressuring her, like taking her aside and pressuring her to do kind of things a little bit more. And again, it's very hard to kind of stand up to someone when you are putting those position, when you're kind of caught off guard, when you are, when, when you're kind of ambushed like that. It's very hard. And I almost kind of think of it like, if you take kind of sex or intimacy out of it, when your boss kind of like ambushes you at work and says, "Oh, you can come in tomorrow, right? To do the shift," when they already know that you're not available, then it's not your shift or whatever, and they maybe ambush you in front of like a meeting of people, and for you to like stand up to them and be very firm and be like, no, requires a lot of you have to be maybe very confident. You could risk pissing off your boss and getting fired. There are consequences to, and in that short space of time, you're having to go through all of these things to voice a concern, or to go to reaffirm your boundaries. So that's kind of, I think, like a if you take it out of the context of sex or intimacy. But when it even comes to sex and intimacy, it's even more so, where you are maybe naked, or you are maybe not in your own home and stuff like that, where you have all of these forces which you might not physically be aware of, or they might not be tangible, but they're there and they're present, and they do affect how you how the discussions of autonomy, of having an empowered no, and reaffirming your boundaries.
Well said.
I mean, it's a long, yeah, it's yeah.
No, but it's so important to remember that in every relationship, every dynamic, intimate, sexual, platonic, professional, every type of relationship, friendship, each relationship, there's going to have its own power dynamic. And acknowledging that is critical, because not acknowledging it is not going to change the situation. And so, I think I think it's important for people to look at that and say, what is my role of power in this relationship? Is this person able to consent without fear, or, any sort
Yeah,
of coercion, because of the role of power that I'm playing in this scenario?
yeah, yeah. I think of it. Yeah, there can be, yeah, like an underlining fear or intimidation, or those are the things that we think of. But it could also be like a financial aspect. So like another thing, like working in sex work, and I think a lot of people's not misunderstanding, but I understand why they feel very strongly about maybe against sex work, is because they understand how money has a lot of power in the discussions of consent. So is that person, by paying someone for a sexual service, of course there is a power dynamic there. Like it, when you suddenly offer someone or there's that common maybe not joke, but like this common saying of like, how much money would you do for like this or that, or this sexual service and stuff like that, because with that kind of saying, people understand the intrinsic power dynamics that comes with money, and I think the reasoning, with sex work is, or a lot of people feel, I guess, iffy about sex work is, that exchange of, maybe someone holding money over someone in exchange for like a sexual service or favor, and without their kind of full consent. But then with sex works, that's where it's I think it has a more nuanced view where and understanding where it is sex workers acknowledge that, well, I think there's a bigger conversation of capitalism, where, okay, under a capitalistic society, a lot of us, we're exchanging our labor for some sort of like income, and we acknowledge that, okay, maybe sometimes sometimes I don't want to get up to go to work, but I have to go to work because I need to put money on or food on the table and stuff like that. And I mean, work outside, not sex work, just any kind of work. So you might not be fully 100% up for doing the work. Like you might not be 100% like enthusiastic, but because like maybe money is on the table, and you recognize, okay, money requires like living and, being able to do lots of other things, you end up, you work to make a living and to provide for yourself. So why not, again, when you think of sex work, why is it not also that discussion of, okay, it is just work. It is a particular form of kind of work where you are exchanging, something, some sort of labor for monetary gain. You might not always, and I kind of preface this in the sense that sex workers do have boundaries. They're not doing things that they don't particularly like. Every sex worker is different. I'm talking mainly about my own experience. I have strict boundaries that I will cross, regardless of how much money you give me. And I feel like there are a lot of sex workers who are who also have like strict boundaries as well. So, in one part, I consent to, okay, doing sex, maybe sex that I might not be enthusiastic about. But I also, I'm enthusiastic enough to, or maybe not enthusiastic. I understand, that it is work, and, I'm happy to exchange within my boundaries, and offer like some form of sexual, services, for that. But it's also recognizing that, with money, there is some form of like power in the discussions of sexual services. So, by putting more and more money on the table, would that erode my boundaries at some point? Will there suddenly be, okay, this person has put so much money on the table, these boundaries that I said I would never ever cross, has it reached a point where, okay, this 100,000 can probably save me for a really long time? Am I prepared to cross a boundary that I never ever wanted to, in order to be, to be financially, and that's like an extreme case. But I'm just trying to make the case of like understanding how also money has, there is power in money, and in its use of exchanging sexual services for money. And I understand why, there is that discussion, or there is that people feel iffy about sex work because of the exchange of money, because we understand that it does hold power.
I think that money is power. Absolutely. I think that often money talks and money is power, and it makes things a lot more confusing, and it's not so black and white. It's a
Yeah.
complex issue that I agree it needs to be talked about more. Um, and so thank you for sharing all
Yeah.
light.
So like, the one element that made me really understand a lot of this kind of the more nuanced discussions of power and its impact on the discussions of consent and boundaries is I'm going to share with you this link. It's from a website called blackandpoly.org, and it's the triangle of consent. The person kind of goes into how this was based or it was a kind, maybe not an improvement, but a different kind of look or view off of I think Franklin, if I pronounce the name right, Franklin Vaux's consent kind of thing, and another person's consent diagram, and I'm just going to try and share the link in the comments, because I can't share a picture.
I'm seeing an option. I'm going to try. There we go.
Yeah, that's perfect. What I really kind of came to understand with this, and if you check out the website, blackandpoly.org, which I've posted in the comments, the triangle of consent, it shows you how intrinsically those three are interlinked. You have power at one point of the consent, consent in the center, and you have power at one point of the tip of the triangle, communication on the second, and agency on the third. And these three are highly, are interlinked. We all know how important communication is in discussing boundaries, discussing consent, discussing what your likes, what your yes, your no's, your maybes are, what you're happy to do when having sex, or what you don't want to do if you don't want to have sex, if you're just happy with kissing. We understand how important communication is in that discussion. How does power influence communication in terms of if someone feels scared about, from, maybe a boss pushing something on them, and that, stops them from being able to speak up or confront, or out of fear of conflict or out of fear of whatever. That is one way power has influence over the discussion, over communication. Again, maybe money could also be, again, all the different kind of ways that you might think of power. And, like, this article doesn't go into all the, the different ways that power shows up, because power has so many different ways of showing up. We've gone just through a few. It could just be from money. It could be from a boss, like an authority figure. It could be out of fear. It could be out of so many different ways. I don't know if you want to talk about any of this before I move on to agency and power, or
Keep doing your thing.
okay. So with agency, again, we understand how important agency in terms of feeling, having the agency or the independence, or to be able to take control of your life, or to, you know, do what you want, without fear of any kind of reprisal, to be able to make an informed choice. How does power influence, again, agency, by stopping you from having agency over yourself? And I just want to share like something that I'm just going to read off one of the ways power influences. So let me just find that. Okay. The first, here it says, the first leg is agency, which is the recognition that we all have the ability to make choices for ourselves. We make these choices based on our own judgment when we're in a relationship. Disclosing relevant information is the way we recognize our partner's agency. So again, if we come back to the topic of sex work, for those people who do feel iffy about sex work and how, you know, power or money has influence over sex work, again, it's maybe understanding how with sex workers are making an informed choice about, you know, the situation they're in, and they have agency, analyzing, you know, in terms of analyzing and making an informed choice based on all that is going on, to make the choice to exchange sexual services, for financial or monetary gain. So, you know, believe sex workers when, you know, they advocate for, you know, themselves. So I think agency, you know, we're recognizing the relationship between power or money or whatever over agency, but still, you know, having an informed choice to make that decision. And if we look at power, you know, here it says the second leg of power, second leg of consent, is the awareness of power. It is no accident that the majority of celebrities called out for sexual assault and harassment in the Me Too movement have been powerful white men. Men born in the USA have been brought up in a culture of toxic masculinity that values aggressiveness, manipulation, and dishonesty in order to get the girl. When a potential partner refuses to consent, a man's response of disappointment and even anger is seen as socially appropriate. So again, you can see how power has, you know, the different forms that power may come into, like fear of, you know, reprisal, of anger, of, you know, like refusing someone's phone number in a bar, or maybe not being able to refuse, or giving a fake number because you fear some sort of reprisal, you fear some sort of aggressive response. So you end up, instead of saying, no, I don't want to give you my number, you know, you just give a fake phone number, because of the history of violence from men. So, yeah.
You know, and even in our own, you know, there's so many different ways, you know, talking about money and power, how money can be held over somebody for coercion, or, you know, the fear, whether it's a safe place to live. Well, not really safe if someone is threatening them, but a roof over your head, a place to live,
Yeah.
food, potentially not outing your sexual orientation or your secrets, or anything that someone can use to have power and try to shame you, that can often just be used against you, you know, by the powerful to get what they want. And so it really
Yeah.
does, power can affect you on your day-to-day
Yeah.
And again, coming back to work, whatever job it is, I don't want to make my boss mad, or I feel like I have to do
Yeah.
this because I have, 2 kids, or I have to feed myself.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it really plays a lot. Well, shall we see if anybody has any questions at this time? And
Yeah.
then while folks are maybe chiming in, I know that you have some more to talk about. Well, I'll give it back to you to keep going. And then if any questions pop in, we'll try to address some of those. Back to you, Rue.
Okay. So, this even goes on further saying, and here I'm quoting, men are not always the bad guys, though, and any relationship between two people is subject to a power imbalance when someone has more seniority, wealth, status, or social support than their partner. The power dynamics of each relationship is not fixed and is always subjective. If someone believes they have less power, that will impact their ability to give consent. To move forward with consent, people should acknowledge the power they hold in the situation. Have they considered the reasons their partner might say yes besides an actual desire to engage? Are they using their position of or cultural privilege to get the sex they want? Can they give their partner the space to say no without fear of consequences? And again, if we bring this back to our personal, so again, not only does this apply to our professional, as I said, at my work as an intimacy coordinator, but also bringing it to our personal lives where, interpersonal or intimate partner violence does happen where, coercion, pressure, feeling like you have to satisfy your partner or you have to give in to sex is a real thing. And that is a key part of power where, through manipulation, through coercion or pressuring, those are things that we have to think about and we have to address when we discuss consent.
Exactly, because coercion is not consent. Um, Anything, as we discussed, anything other than like an enthusiastic, informed yes is not consent.
Yeah,
Someone wrote in, sometimes we don't even realize others are manipulating us.
yeah,
So true. Sad how talented and good some of these, covert manipulation.
yeah,
There, and a lot of Darvo also kind of talking about power
yeah,
dynamics. Um, Often, if someone in power is called out, they'll immediately deny,
mm,
attack, and reverse the victim and
yeah,
offender, and make the victim be the offender. And there it goes back to, oh,
yeah, yeah.
for me,
I'm a victim.
I did
Yeah,
here.
I'm just gonna read this last one and then maybe go into some not technically solutions, but more resources that other people can think about when trying to shift power imbalances and trying to address power imbalances because power imbalances will inevitably happen in our relationships. It's about talking about them. It's about addressing them, not kind of leaving them, you know, un yeah, like they don't exist. Yeah. So consent is almost meaningless when one partner has created a power imbalance through coercion and violence. People evaluating consent from the outside cannot use someone's failure to stand up to or leave their abuser as a sign of consent. In the same way, it can be difficult to tell if a situation is sexual harassment or not. We can only start by believing the accuser and they mean oh yeah, the accuser. I don't know why they didn't say victim or survivor, and looking for patterns in each person's behavior as it relates to power imbalance. So what I wanted to share were some resources that I kind of came about in kind of like balancing the influences of power dynamics, which is there's this really good TED talk about how sex needs a new metaphor, and how we should kind of treat sex as ordering pizza, like a slice of pizza, and how everyone likes different toppings on their pizza, just because you can go for like if you're sharing a pizza with someone, one person can go for pepperoni, someone can go for just cheese, and you're still sharing the pizza and you're both enjoying and having a good time. It doesn't, you shouldn't just, force your pepperoni to be on all the whole pizza, um, yeah, this TED talk is like really, really good in terms of how it tries to change the discussion, or, this thought of, what's the three bases of sex, of, the first base, second base, third base, that whole kind of, where that is like such a outdated, and I don't know if there's the right term, antiquated,
Yeah.
way of thinking of sex. And we should rather be, thinking like that, or, in other ways. Another way that I've also, so, with the pizza method and this other method that I'm going to talk about, you are addressing, issues that may be, that, you all kind of have, one, you're communicating, you're giving the other person agency. You might be, you should be also addressing like power dynamics in the, those kind of conversations as well. Another, resource that I found is something called like a sex menu, where you kind I think Refinery 29 has a post on it, but if you just literally type in Google sex menu, it's you create this kind of list of, what do you like when you have sex? Like what are your likes? What really gets you? What makes you orgasm? What are the things that don't? What don't you like? What are your no list? What are your yes? What are your maybe? What is like your yes? And then, the other person also has like a list of things, and then you kind of exchange it. It's, kind of like, yeah, going to a restaurant and looking at the menu and kind of being like, okay, this works for me. Like, if exchanging the menus with each other and being like, this is actually on my nose list, what you want, or what gets you off. So I would rather not add it to our, our, what we're gonna, our 3-course meal or whatever dining experience that we're gonna have. And again, like, having those discussions and, trying to really, at the end, I think, having discussions and acknowledging and really kind of creating space for people to have like an empowered no, goes a long way. Again, there is a lot more work that goes into this. We are fighting against, rape culture, which is so ingrained into our society. But I think these are like a few things that are, can start the conversation and start healing, and also start creating a better and safer world.
Here's to a safer world. Cheers for that. Well, thank you again for joining. And I also want to say I love the pizza metaphor. I'm gonna look at that TED Talk. That sounds fascinating. And the
Yeah.
more the whole, first base, second base, third base. Yes, antiquated. When you started talking about that, that is exactly the word that came to mind. Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining. Folks, this is Hello Rooster. If you want to find out more about them, they are doing incredible work, educating the masses and training to be an intimacy coordinator and leading these amazing conversations. So thank you again for being here. I really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you for creating this space. And yeah, I really, really love your work, and it's been really, really healing for me. So thank you for letting me be part of this.
I am honored. I am honored, and I look forward to. I feel like we have a lot to talk about, so I hope that we can do this again soon.
Definitely.
Excellent, and thank you all for taking time on your Saturday to join us, and we will see you soon. Bye.
See you. Bye.